Today we're making a carnivore shepherd's pie that's rich, comforting, and surprisingly satisfying without the usual potato or vegetables. Under this golden buttery crust is a savory beef filling with a light creamy gravy that keeps the meat tender and flavorful. If you're looking for a hearty carnivore comfort food, this one is definitely worth trying. For the crust, we'll be using 1 large egg yolk, half a cup of unsalted butter, 3 tablespoons of tallow or lard, 2/3 of a cup of whole milk powder, a 1/4 cup of egg white protein powder or egg white powder, a 1/4 teaspoon of gelatin powder, and half a teaspoon of unrefined sea salt. For the filling, we'll be using 2 pounds of ground beef, and I particularly like using primal ground beef for this recipe as it also contains organ meats. 1 tablespoon of butter or beef tallow, either fat works well in this filling, half a cup of beef broth or bone broth, 1 teaspoon of unflavored gelatin powder, 2 tablespoons of heavy cream, 1 tablespoon of cream cheese or sour cream, and 1 teaspoon of unrefined sea salt. We're first going to bloom the gelatin in cold water. Sprinkle the gelatin over 1½ teaspoons of cold water and let it sit for about 3 to 5 minutes so it can bloom. This allows the gelatin to absorb the water and soften properly. Blooming it first helps it dissolve smoothly and prevents clumping later on. It also ensures the gelatin will blend evenly into the filling when we add it. Once it has bloomed, add another 1½ teaspoons of warm water and stir until the gelatin has completely dissolved. In a bowl, combine the milk powder, egg white protein powder, and sea salt. Stir the mixture well so the dry ingredients are evenly blended. These ingredients contribute valuable nutrients, providing high-quality protein and minerals to help support the structure in this recipe, while also offering nourishment for the body. Milk powder and egg proteins are particularly rich in essential amino acids, which play an important role in tissue repair and overall health. We'll divide the butter into 2 portions, a 1/4 cup of softened butter and a 1/4 cup of cold cubed butter. Using 2 temperatures of butter helps create the right balance of structure and tenderness in the crust. And we will also be mixing in the tallow with the softened butter. Adapting traditional comfort foods to a carnivore approach can actually be a lot of fun. Shepherd's pie is normally made with a layer of potatoes on top, so recreating that same comforting feeling in a fully animal-based way does come with a few challenges. If there's a traditional dish that you'd love to see adapted into a carnivore version, let me know in the comments. Now it's time to add the cold cubed butter. Gently mix it until the dough forms a uniform, chunky mixture. To help create a more cohesive texture, I'm going to use a pastry cutter, also known as a dough blender. This tool helps break up the butter into the dry ingredients while keeping small pieces intact. You should still see small pieces of butter throughout the dough, which will help create a lighter texture as the crust bakes. And finally, we'll add in the egg yolk and dissolved gelatin. Mix just until everything comes together into a soft dough. The egg yolk helps add richness and tenderness to the crust, while the gelatin supports structure and stability as it bakes. You can find the full recipe card at carnivorecollections.com or use the link in the description below. Once the dough has come together, we'll gently shape it into a disc. Try not to overwork it here, just bring it together until it holds its shape. Keeping the dough lightly handled at this stage helps maintain a more tender texture once it's baked. It may feel a bit soft now, but that's exactly what we want before chilling. Then we'll place it in the fridge for about 30 minutes to allow the fats to firm up. This step will make the dough much easier to roll out and work with. While the dough is chilling in the refrigerator, we'll move on to preparing the filling. To start, preheat the oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Then sprinkle the gelatin over 2 tablespoons of the bone broth and let that sit for 3 to 5 minutes to bloom. We'll then melt the tallow or butter over medium heat and add the ground beef, cooking it until it's just browned. Try not to overcook the meat at this stage, as it will continue to cook in the oven. Break it up gently as it cooks, and this will help create a more even texture throughout the fillings. You're looking for the beef to be mostly cooked through while still tender and moist. Then we'll pour in the remaining broth and allow it to simmer for 2 to 3 minutes. Next, we'll add in the unrefined sea salt. Unrefined salt contains trace minerals that help support electrolyte balance and overall hydration. There is sometimes some concern around heavy metals, but the amounts present are extremely small and comparable to what we've already been exposed to in everyday whole foods like meat and seafood. In that context, they're considered negligible and not a concern for overall health, while the mineral content remains intact. Now we'll stir in the bloom gelatin until it's fully dissolved into the mixture. This helps bring everything together and gives the filling a more cohesive texture. Gelatin also provides amino acids that support joint health, digestion, and connective tissue. Then we'll add the heavy cream and cream cheese or sour cream for extra flavor. Let that simmer for about 2 to 3 more minutes, just until the sauce thickens and slightly begins to coat the meat. This step helps create a richer, more cohesive filling rather than a watery base. You'll know it's ready when the sauce lightly clings to the beef and looks smooth and creamy. If the sauce looks too liquidy, you can add a small amount of additional gelatin and allow the mixture to simmer for a few more minutes. This will help the sauce thicken and better coat the meat. Just add it gradually so you don't over-thicken the mixture. And now we'll transfer the filling into a 9-inch glass pie pan and let it sit for about 10 minutes before adding the top crust. This allows the filling to thicken slightly as it rests. It also helps prevent the heat from melting the fats in the crust too quickly. Taking this step will give you a more stable pie and a cleaner slice once baked. Now that the dough has had a chance to chill, we'll use parchment to shape it into a top crust. Here I'm using unbleached parchment that is free from chlorine, which is a cleaner option. It also helps prevent sticking and makes the dough much easier to handle when we roll it out. Place the dough between 2 sheets of parchment paper and roll it out to about a 1/4 inch thickness. When I was first working with this type of dough, I found that rolling it directly on a surface made it much more difficult to manage. Using parchment really simplified the process and gave a more consistent result each time. Let me know in the comments if you've tried working with this type of carnivore style dough, or if this would be your first time. If you find the dough isn't quite firm enough to work with, you can place it in the freezer for about 5 minutes. Otherwise, you can transfer it directly onto the beef filling. This quick chill helps to firm up the fat, making the dough easier to handle and less likely to tear. It also helps the crust hold its shape better once it goes into the oven. Gently place the crust over the cooled filling and press the edges in to secure it. Take your time here and position everything evenly across the surface. If needed, you can trim away any excess dough for a cleaner finish. This helps the pie bake more evenly and gives it a polished look. What do you prefer? A more rustic finish, or do you like to keep your pies neat and evenly shaped? Now we'll cut several small vents in the crust to allow the steam to escape. You can also personalize this step and create small designs if you like. It's a small detail, but it adds a nice touch to the finished pie. At this point, we'll place the entire pie back in the refrigerator for one final chill before baking. This helps firm up the fats in the crust so it holds its shape better in the oven. It also reduces the chance of the butter separating during baking. And here you can see the nice definition between the top crust and the beef filling below. For one final touch, we'll be brushing the top of the pie with a little melted butter. My preferred tool for this is a natural boar bristle brush, as it gives a more even and gentle application. This helps enhance the color and adds a subtle richness to the finished crust. We'll now place the pie in the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit and bake it for 10 minutes. Then reduce the temperature to 320 degrees Fahrenheit and continue to bake for another 30 minutes. Allow the pie to rest for about 15 minutes before slicing it so that the filling can fully set. As I cut through the top, you can see how tender and flaky the crust is. This is exactly what we were aiming for. It breaks cleanly while still holding its shape, giving a nice contrast to the filling underneath. The texture is light and delicate, yet sturdy enough to slice through easily. As you lift the slice, you can see how the crust sits neatly over the filling without collapsing. It creates a really satisfying balance between structure and softness in each bite. And here we have our carnivore shepherd's pie, finished and ready to serve. For the full recipe card, visit carnivorecollections.com. If you give this recipe a try, I'd love to hear how it turns out for you. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more carnivore recipes.